can see I'm set up here at the drill press. I've had to put some blocks under this because these handles on these clamps are really long. If you stick them up the other way, they get in your way here at the top, so they have to be down, or at least that's the better way. But, you know, I'll just work this across here and get these holes drilled. It should work out fairly easy. I don't like this anchored down when you're drilling holes like this because the drill will find its center here this way if you keep it loose. If you anchor it, you know, you could drill the hole off center. Well, that worked just fine. Now I'll reposition this, put it on the other side. Got the pattern all repositioned and ready to drill the other side. I believe that takes care of that. Now we'll get a larger drill bit and countersink the backside. Alright, I've got a 25/64 drill here that will countersink this and fit to the tuning key. So here we go. Well, I'm not sure that the camera was on when I countersinked drilling these holes on the back. I thought I had it on, but then I noticed when I got done it didn't seem to be on, so I don't know if it stopped on me or what. But regardless, we've got it all drilled and they all fit up just nice. I just put the 2 washers and the 2 nuts on those 2 just to see that everything was going to work out okay. It looks like it's going to be fine. If anything, the peg head is a hair thick, but I don't think it's really that thick. It's kind of nice to have it good and solid because of all the strings, and you know, it just gives it more sustain. These heavy peg heads is one of the reasons why 12 strings have such, you know, great sustain. They're a very heavy peg head. So, you know, with all those tuning keys, of course, you would expect it to be heavy. And these are the mini Grover tuning keys, by the way, just so you have an idea. But they're going to look nice once we get her all finished up. We'll move on to the next step now. Well, I've been jumping around quite a bit on this 12 string, trying to get all the balls in the air at once, and that's pretty much impossible, but I do have a good chunk of this thing finished. Now I think I'm going to go ahead and try to trim up these strips and get them level with the back. They're a little proud on both sides, actually. So again, I'll start with my finger plane. Probably go right to a scraper pretty quickly because they're not very proud. Well, it's a little hard to decide if that's going to work out real well or not. It's a little bit funky. You know, it's hard to get that kind of thing level. It just is, because these were standing up a little bit proud, so when you put the weight on it, then the weight's pretty much riding on these 2 things here, not really riding on the rest of it, so it's not all perfectly matched. It's close, but I think we can sand it and work with it enough to make it work. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just go straight to my sander, and we'll see how that looks. Well, it's not perfectly flat yet, but it's not bad. And I think I'm going to go ahead and get the pattern on here and cut it out, so that way I'm only sanding the part that matters. Save a little sanding. Anyway, it's pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with it. It turned out pretty tight, so I think everything's going to be fine. Got the pattern pretty well centered. I'm going to trace around it with the Sharpie. The Sharpie gives you a little bit thicker line. You can cut to the outside of that line and gives you a little margin for error that way. And you can also see it pretty easily. So I think that's where we're going. Let's cut that out. It's going to be a good looking back, it looks like to me. Well, we're ready to start cutting out the back here, and once I get that cut out, then we just have a few more sub-assemblies and we're ready to put this guitar together. Well, that went perfectly, except when I went to lay down the piece of scrap, I accidentally pulled this into the blade, wasn't watching. I don't think it'll be a problem because we've got to cut binding there and everything, and so if it is a problem, I'll just put a wider binding on it, so, you know, that'll just be a plus for the customer because it'll just get more binding, but I don't think it will be. I don't think it's even going to get into the regular binding, let alone anything additional. The back is really stiff and really heavy, so I'm going to do some sanding and just clean it up. I'm probably not going to show that. You've already seen a little bit of the sanding on this. So I'll just do some sanding and get it all cleaned up real good, and we'll move on from there. Well, it really turned out beautiful. In fact, it turned out every bit as good as I was hoping, or better. So I'm real pleased with that. We'll be moving on to putting the braces onto that. Probably be the next step. I keep skipping around a little bit on building on this 12 string, but that kind of keeps it interesting for me, moving from one part to the next. So I'm back to the top here, and I thought I'd start cutting out these braces. Got my trusty firewood mallet here. I made it out of a piece of oak many years ago. I just used a draw knife and made the whole thing with a draw knife. And you can see it's been used. I've used it on everything you can imagine. Beaten metal, beaten chisels. It's just been used as a big heavy war club. And the dogs have decided to tree something out there right outside my window. Probably somebody is driving up, I would imagine. I don't know if I'm even going to use the mallet or not. This wood cuts pretty easy, and these chisels are pretty sharp. I really need to find a way to stop this from moving, and I could get out that bench dog thing that I made, but this is kind of big for that actually. So I'd either have to make me a bigger one or something. I don't know. You know, I could just let it bump up against the stuff that you can't see there, which I can do that. And that'll help some. Still wants to roll though, because I'd have to bump it all the way up here to stop that, and then you can't see what I'm doing, and I don't think I can even get the camera down that far. So anyway, it is what it is. It's late on a Friday in terms of time frame, so I'm not much longer on this anyway. Just thought I'd knock off some of the bulk of it. And that may be all I do, is just knock off some of the bulk. As you can possibly see, I've knocked off the ends, and that's really all I've done, and I wouldn't even say they are down to final, but at least I've knocked off some of that bulk. Now I've got my little trusty finger plane, and I think I'll go ahead and knock off some of this. Yeah, like I said, it's late on a Friday, and I'm tired. My hands hurt like crazy, but, you know, this has to get done. So, you know, if you don't stick with it, you just never get these things done. And as I've said before, they'll carve from one direction much better than they'll carve from the other. And almost any time I start, I need to be from the other side. That's pretty much a black and white. Anytime there's a 50-50 chance, there's about a 90% chance I'll have it wrong. Yeah, it carves much better from that direction. I don't think I'm going to scallop the braces on this 12 string just for a strength issue, but I will make them fairly thin because I don't want it, to be clunky. I want it to be a nice brace, but I don't think I'm going to scallop it. "12 strings have a tendency to pull, so I think I'll keep it as strong as I can keep it, and we'll see how it goes." Oh, my hands really are hurting. I'm not kidding you. They're just killing me. I don't think I'm going to be able to do very much more of this today. If I wasn't so stubborn, I would have already quit a long time ago today. Well, that side doesn't want to carve from that direction. This side wants to carve from this direction, which is pretty common on braces, actually. And those are still pretty heavy, but that's about all I'm going to be able to do on them, I think. Might try knocking this big one down a little bit, rounding it off mostly. This one stays pretty big because it's where a lot of the strength comes from the neck to the top. So for the most part, all I do is round this one off a little bit, just make it look nicer. This brace here also just gets kind of domed or rounded over. Again, it's part of the strength for the neck. The strength of the neck is kind of transferred into the top right here at these two places. It's looking pretty good, but I may have to get a file in here and clean this edge up a little bit, or a chisel like this, and get in here and clean this edge up. I can't get the plane down in there deep enough. There we go, that did a pretty good job. That looks much better already. Just knocking off the bulk of it, really. I'm not going to try to get down to the detail of these tonight. I will work on that probably Monday and get the detail of these braces carved in. It just never seems to carve from the direction I want to carve. The direction that would be easy won't carve that way. Carving from this X back is much more difficult. But that's the way it wants to be carved. Wouldn't you know? This one's carving okay that way, which is a plus. Grabbing a little bit, but not too bad. Well, that's about all the carving I'm going to do for it for today. My hands seriously are just aching, so I'm going to just let it rest. And this side's not as equal. I'm going to do one little bit more right here just to equal it up. The OCD in me can't stand it because it's not a little more equal with the rest of it. Yeah, it's a little better. It's not great, but that's good enough. I'm done. Well, for me, it's going to be a couple of days before I get back to this, but for you, it'll probably just be in 3, 2, 1. My friends, it's Monday morning, and I have spent off camera about 2 hours almost, not quite that long, carving these braces. Ordinarily, that's something I could do in, seriously, 15 minutes to 20 minutes tops. And I didn't even scallop these. And it's just all the arthritis and the pain holding this thing. So I don't think there's going to be too many more carved instruments in my future, unfortunately. But, you know, I'm getting an A note on this. It's got good sustain. I can hear it a real long time. That long. So it's got real good sustain and everything. I'm leaving the braces a little bit buffy on this one, just a little bit bigger, because it's a 12 string and I don't want to have any problems with the top. You know, I think it would play and sound good even as a 6 string the way I have it carved, but you know, I just don't feel comfortable going much smaller than where I'm at, and I definitely don't think I want to scallop the braces for the 12 string. So I guess my next step will be to cut the pad and put it in here, and as you might guess, I'm going to put a fairly large pad in here, and I'm going to probably leave it about, normally I make them about 100 thousandths of an inch thick, and I'll probably make this pad 110 thousandths of an inch thick. And 10 thousandths may sound like a lot to some of you, but it's about the thickness of 2 human hairs, roughly, maybe just a hair more than that. When you spread that out over the whole plate, it definitely adds some stiffness to the plate, but yet it won't make it any significant amount heavier or anything like that. So that's my plan at the moment. I'll probably, you know, let this set a little while, come back to it, look at it again, and see if I feel like I can do any better carving it anymore. But it's in pretty darn good shape, and we may just leave it that way. So there you go. Once again off camera, I made this little Paduke bridge plate, and it is 115 thousandths, so I actually went another 5 thousandths thick on this. You can see it's still very thin. It's not real big and thick, but this Paduke is very stiff. It's a very good tone wood. It's the perfect use in this area, I believe. So I'm going to now take some acetone and clean it off, and you can see how quickly it turns the rag that color. Really does have a lot of stuff on it. We'll turn it over here and find a clean, relatively clean spot on the rag and do it again. Doesn't take much. It really, this stuff gives off a lot of color. It's amazing. I don't know how to do it, but it would be kind of cool to make something and use this wood as a dye, you know, because I think it would really be a very potent dye, actually. In fact, you can see it on my fingers. It's kind of crazy how this stuff just turns everything that color, including the dust and everything else. You know, it's rough enough from the sanding probably, but I think just to play it a little safe, take this tooth blade and just go over it lightly, just enough to scrape it, just rough it up a little bit. Doesn't need much. You know, since this is where the strength really counts, we might as well make sure we're doing as good as we can. Again, I normally just use regular Titebond, but I've got the Titebond 3 handy. And again, since this is one of those things that I never want to come loose, I'll just go ahead and use Titebond 3. I think Titebond original is plenty strong for this, don't get me wrong. But the thing that this glue has as an advantage is that it's waterproof in addition, and therefore even high moisture would not affect this. So that's the reason I'm using it. As often I do when I'm just talking and doing something, I put way too much glue on this. Don't need near that much glue. So in fact, I'm actually going to just take and wipe some of it off here with my finger, because there's no reason to have that much glue on there and create a big mess. Although I do want to leave plenty because I didn't put glue on the other surface. So here we go. And there is a cutout in this board, so I'm moving back here just behind that cutout, and then we'll take the braces and put them in here. That is, if we can find the ones that are long enough. Whenever I'm not looking for the long ones, I pretty much grab them instinctively. It's just kind of standard practice. Trying to get as many clamps on this as I can, again, mostly because this is a flat surface, and flat surfaces are harder to glue down. This probably would have been a fairly good candidate for the vacuum pressing system. Actually, probably would have been even a better way to glue it, but this is fine. It'll work just fine. I believe we've got her glued down as well as it needs to be and pressed into place. So I'll take a damp paintbrush now and just kind of clean up the glue squeeze out a little bit. Well, my friends, for you, it has been just mere seconds. For me, it's been another 24 hours, or at least overnight. And we'll take these sticks out of here to see how well the board glued up. It looks like it glued up just fine. Everything's perfectly flat on this flat top guitar. And I thought I'd go ahead and give you a status of just where we're at on the guitar. Okay, so you can see the top has been, the braces have been carved. Everything is pretty much finished on the top. You can see the rosette has been made. No bridge, of course. Let's just tap the top. I doubt you're going to hear it very well, but let's tap it anyway and see what it sounds like. Got a long sustain. I'm going to wash out the camera here by putting the thing right in front of it for the mic. Really long sustain. That long. Really depends on how hard you hit it, of course, but it really does sustain a very long time. Got a nice tone to it. The back still doesn't have braces, so I have to do that yet. The neck is basically finished, at least the construction part of the neck. I made the truss rod yesterday, and I have it just sitting in place. It's not tightened down or anything. I'm going to use this neck as a demonstration on truss rods and what they do and how they work. That'll be a separate short video that I'll have Melissa produce for you. But be watching for that, because I'm going to hopefully get rid of a whole lot of the myths about truss rods, because people just believe all sorts of things about truss rods that are not true. So anyway, we're going to do that a little bit later. And then you can see the state of the sides. So the next step I'm going to do when I get back to working on this is I'm going to reinforce the sides with just strips of wood. And the reason I say when I get back to this is because Uncle Sam is calling me. I've got to get started on my taxes. So we're going to go do that right now. Well, my friends, while the tax software is downloading with our crazy fast internet, which should only take about 5 minutes ordinarily, will take about another hour. So I'll give you some idea how fast our internet is. I decided to come back in here and start putting these strips in while I'm waiting for that download. I've made these strips out of high quality spruce, quarter sawed, and the quarter saw is running perpendicular to the grain of the sides. And I made them, since this is going to Scotland, I figured I ought to do something in metric. So I made these 14.5 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters thick. Actually, it's 2.01 millimeters, but who's counting? You know, so I'm using the story stick method for spacing these. If you don't know what a story stick is, then you're probably not a carpenter. Carpenters use story sticks all the time. If they've got something that needs to be equally spaced, they just cut a stick to that length and then they use it over and over. Or another method of a story stick is you put marks on one stick and you use those marks to space things out. But anyway, so basically that's what I'm doing. I've got this little stick here that I'm using. It's going to be my spacer, and I'll just use that and space them out like that. And we may as well get some glue on these. And I haven't checked this glue bot this morning, but it's probably froze up. Nope, it's open this time. See just how much glue I can smear all over everything. It's always much better to just create a real mess than it is to do it accurately. So far, I've managed to get it on about every finger I've got. Hopefully my technique will improve. All right, so the first one's more or less in place. Now we just need to find some clamping possibilities. And I'm not exactly sure what those are going to be. I may try this. These are some little cheap Harbor Freight clamps. They're rubber on there, and I think they'll work great for the top. But the bottom down here, I'm going to have to come up with something else to do a better job. So I'll be back momentarily. Well, you can see I got the other one clamped on there, and it seems to be holding just fine. Now we'll see if we can't make yet another mess with this glue. And put the story stick in place and clamp the next one in place. We will once again take the Harbor Freight special clamp there, put that in place, and we'll go get another clamp for this. Well, we're on to brace number 3 here, and you can see I've also been filing off the corners on all of these braces, just kind of beveling the edges so that they're clean and neat. That is, just the edge that's turned out is beveled. The edge that's against the side is left sharp and flat. I've already marked where this one goes using the story stick again. For some reason this one's being a little contrary in that the side must have a little slight bow to it or something. Don't know if we can get this one in there or not. Have to put a little wedge in here to make it take up the space, I think. It's not really working very well. I'm going to have to get a better clamp for this. I could take these out of the mold and do it, but I'm afraid that the sides could distort just a little bit. That's the reason I'm going to this extra trouble of doing it inside the mold. Until I get the top or back attached, the top would be the first one I attach. It's just better, I think, to keep it in the mold. But then again, it is creating its own little issues by doing that. Well, I'm going to progress on like that, as you can see what I'm doing, until I'm finished. And no point in eating up a whole lot more video for that. I'll show you what it looks like when I get her clamped up. Well, there's what she looks like all clamped up on one side. And I'll get the other side done off camera, and we'll move on to the next step. As you can see, I have sanded, actually I've only sanded one side of all the braces. I've sanded the side that is closest to the sound hole on all of these braces. I haven't sanded up here yet. I'm going to get all of the braces sanded on the sound hole side, and then I'll go back through and sand all the braces on the opposite side. This gives them a finished look. You know, you could probably avoid this step if you really wanted to, but you know, it just gives it a much more finished look when you look inside the guitar. It looks real nice this way, nice and smooth. I'm using 180 grit sandpaper, so it's pretty smooth sandpaper. Okay, I think I'll go back through now and sand the opposite side of all of the braces. And we'll give you one more look at it before we attach it to the sides. Well, I've got the whole top sanded real well. The braces are carved real nice. Everything's real uniform looking. One last thing I want to do is cover this X right here with a little bit of reinforcement cloth. I thought I'd show you a close-up of that. Perhaps you can see how I carved the detail in that. Keep in mind those were two square braces originally, and you can see how they more or less come to a peak there, a point, and that's because I carved this one here, I carved, you know, into it and kept that line going across this way. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but anyway, it is all carved that way, hand carved. And now I'm going to just put some glue on this. You could use Elmer's or anything. Pretty much any kind of wood glue on this would be just fine. You could probably even get away with your liquid hide glue or something. I don't think I'd try CA glue on this because you would really have a mess. But, oh my goodness, it's stretching. I didn't really expect that. So I've got a real problem here. This, I may have to do a different one. That didn't work well. I'm just going to try that again. I think I'm going to do it differently this time. I'm just going to put the glue on here and spread it around. Apply the cloth and hope for the best. This gauze cloth, it just wads up real easy, so you know, you just have to try different things till you find what works. It's just not cooperating because we have the camera on. That's the main reason. But this gauze, it really will conform to this very well, so that's a good reason to use this. Okay, now I can try smearing the glue around on the cloth a little bit. I don't know where all the glue goes. It seems to just get absorbed into this kind of stuff. You put a lot of glue on this and it just keeps kind of disappearing on you. That looks pretty good. I would like to get rid of the extra I've got down in here. I probably will just wait till it dries and then just chisel some of that back out of there. With a sharp chisel you could cut it pretty easy. Sometimes you gotta know when to quit. I think I'm stirring it up a little bit too much now. I had it probably better just a minute ago than I do right now actually. So at some point you just gotta figure on quitting. And I think I'll quit right there. And like I said, we'll clean up the excess stuff after it dries. Another day has dawned here in the workshop and I am about ready to attach the top to the sides. I have gone over it really carefully and I believe everything is just perfect. I have cut the braces off so that they come right to the inside edge of the kerf. And everything fits just like a glove when you get it in there. It doesn't move at all. It lays good and flat. It's right down the center line. It's just about as good as it gets. So I say it's time to glue it on. So here we go. Well, that ought to do it. I'll just take a look through the backside hole here to see if I see any problems. Otherwise, it should be just fine. Yeah, there's good squeeze out pretty much everywhere. Right here at the neck block, I don't see squeeze out, so I'm going to go ahead and just put a little wedge here under these just to make sure it's good and tight. I think it is, but just to play it safe. Back here I saw a real good squeeze out all around here, all around the edges, so it looks real good. So I think we're fine. And we'll let that set for many hours. My friends, I have spent entirely too much time getting this truss rod exactly like I want it. I couldn't even begin to tell you how long I've worked on it. But it's been a long time, actually. I've got a small filler piece back here to fill in behind at the end of the truss rod to help anchor it a little bit. There's a long underbow in this, not so much that you can see it real well, but if you look down it, you can see it. So this underbow like this, that's the way it will go in the deal here. So when you tighten this up, then it pulls this straight, which lifts the middle of the neck slightly. I have a filler piece here, which I also put a little tiny channel in, which should ride right on top of this. And you can see it does ride right on top of it, pretty much perfectly. And it goes right up to almost to the threads there, where it actually terminates right here at the top of this lip right there, so that the nut and the washer are pushing even against this little stick a little bit too. But anyway, make a long story short, I think we're ready to put it all in place. I think we're ready to glue it in. I left it standing up proud here about 1/16 of an inch, which we can carve off later. I can still get the washer and the nut on it while it's in place, and yet the washer and the nut are below the surface of this, which is what you have to have. And you can still get a nut driver on this, though it does take kind of a special nut driver. I'm not going to lie to you, I've had to grind this one down. I did that a long time ago because often it's hard to get a nut driver into these places. So anyway, I'm going to try to get this exactly like I want it in terms of the curve. I've ground off the top of this back here so that it will be flush. It's difficult to do. This for some reason keeps spinning on me. This one's probably been one of the hardest ones I've ever done in terms of it keeps wanting to spin a little bit. I think it's probably because this rod is a little thicker, a little heavier. As I may have mentioned, I made a heavier rod in this case. It's approximately 200 and some thousandths. We can actually measure that here. It's a 12/24 thread, which is kind of unusual. You don't see that very often. It's 213 thousandths. So, for my millimeter friends, let's just see what that would equate to. Well, 213 thousandths in millimeters is about 5.4 millimeters. Give you some idea. So it's smaller than a 1/4 inch type rod, but bigger than 3/16. It's just about perfect for this application, with this being a 12 string, I think. I'm ready to glue it into place, or glue this stick into place, I think. I really do think I've got it as good as it can be done. So, take this back off here temporarily. And take the rod back out of it temporarily so I can get to this little piece here and get glue on the bottom of it. Don't want a lot of squeeze out anywhere on this stuff. Now I'm only going to put glue on the sides of this piece and then spread it very thinly so it won't be squeezing out and getting on the rod and all that. Plus, as I put it in there, the glue will go to the top more than down. Some folks put the rod in a straw, and I've done that myself, but I find that it's really not that necessary. I believe we've got it just like I want it. I'm going to just get some clamps put on this. Doesn't take much. These clamps don't really hold much, they're just keeping the stick down in there while the glue sets. I want the stick to be forced down as far as it can go while the glue sets up. And now is a good time to make sure I can still get the washer on and the nut on, and it looks like I can. The dynamics of this kind of stuff can change fairly quickly, fairly easily, so you want to double check everything. I really like these little Menard squeeze clamps like these. These are really nice. I like them better than the Irwin ones, actually. They work a little different. They got this releases in the back instead of under the trigger like these are, but you know, once you get used to it, I think these are actually a better clamp. They're stronger for sure, and they have a little more reach too. So we'll just let that sit and do its thing for a couple hours. The next thing I'm going to do is build a little trap right here with tape and fill this with epoxy. In fact, I could go ahead and do that now, I guess, while this is all setting up. That way this thing here won't spin if we get this all filled with epoxy here. As you can probably see, I've mixed up some epoxy and filled in the nut area here with the epoxy to keep it firm where it won't spin later. Now it's just a matter of setting it aside and letting everything cure.